The president's going to speak in a couple of minutes, but until he does, I want to ask you what you hope to hear from him, or maybe what you expect to hear from him here in a couple of minutes.
Well, I hope that he's going to say that he's going to come and sit down at the table with Republicans and talk about how we could resolve the debt crisis we've got in our country. But to me, it really means structural reform. I think you have to amend the Constitution. You have to tell Congress you have to balance the budget, because I don't think we have the spine or the willpower to do it without new rules.
Can you do that before or between now and August 2nd?
Well, I think what you could do, and what we're proposing, and I'm actually in favor of, is I will vote to raise the debt ceiling as long as Congress passes the balanced budget amendment. It will still have to go to the states, but I have full confidence in the people. I mean, polls routinely show 70 to 75% of the American people across the board, Republican, Democrat, and Independent, are for a balanced budget amendment. They also distrust Congress to do the job. I mean, about 14% of the American public think we're doing a good job, and there's not much evidence up here that really we can do what we're supposed to do, and that's have the fiscal discipline to cut spending.
Senator, I want you to forgive me if I have to interrupt you to go to the president, but I do want to ask you about your plan to filibuster on the floor of the Senate any other proposed legislation that doesn't involve directly dealing with the budget and this debt ceiling. Is this a sign that, look, we've got 4 weeks or less to go before this August 2nd deadline, and we've yet to get serious? I think people almost find that hard to believe.
Well, we actually have won a battle. This afternoon, there was supposed to be a vote to end our filibuster, and we had 41 votes, and the Democrats have capitulated.
All right, Senator, I'm going to have to interrupt you. Hang with us, if you will. Let's go to the president right now, live at the White House.
We've been having for the last several weeks, and I want to wish, again, everybody a happy 4th of July. Over the July 4th weekend, my team and I had a series of discussions with congressional leaders in both parties. We've made progress, and I believe that greater progress is within sight, but I don't want to fool anybody. We still have to work through some real differences. Now, I've heard reports that there may be some in Congress who want to do just enough to make sure that America avoids defaulting on our debt in the short term, but then wants to kick the can down the road when it comes to solving the larger problem of our deficit. I don't share that view. I don't think the American people here sent us here to avoid tough problems. That's, in fact, what drives them nuts about Washington, when both parties simply take the path of least resistance. And I don't want to do that here. I believe that right now we've got a unique opportunity to do something big, to tackle our deficit in a way that forces our government to live within its means, that puts our economy on a stronger footing for the future, and still allows us to invest in that future. Most of us already agree that to truly solve our deficit problem, we need to find trillions in savings over the next decade, and significantly more in the decades that follow. That's what the Bipartisan Fiscal Commission said. That's the amount that I put forward in the framework I announced a few months ago. That's around the same amount that Republicans have put forward in their own plans. And that's the kind of substantial progress that we should be aiming for here. To get there, I believe we need a balanced approach. We need to take on spending in domestic programs, in defense programs, in entitlement programs, and we need to take on spending in the tax code, spending on certain tax breaks and deductions for the wealthiest of Americans. This will require both parties to get out of our comfort zones and both parties to agree on real compromise. I'm ready to do that. I believe there are enough people in each party that are willing to do that. And what I know is that we need to come together over the next 2 weeks to reach a deal that reduces the deficit and upholds the full faith and credit of the United States government and the credit of the American people. That's why, even as we continue discussions today and tomorrow, I've asked leaders of both parties and both houses of Congress to come here to the White House on Thursday so we can build on the work that's already been done and drive towards a final agreement. It's my hope that everybody's going to leave their ultimatums at the door, that we'll all leave our political rhetoric at the door, and that we're going to do what's best for our economy and do what's best for our people. And I want to emphasize, I said this at my press conference, this should not come down to the last second. I think it's important for us to show the American people and their leaders that we can find common ground and solve our problems in a responsible way. We know that it's going to require tough decisions. I think it's better for us to take those tough decisions sooner rather than later. That's what the American people expect of us. That's what a healthy economy is going to require. That's the kind of progress that I expect to make. So I promise I will keep you guys updated as time goes on. All right?
All right, that was the president speaking on essentially where we stand right now. Let's go back to Kentucky Senator Rand Paul. First of all, Senator, thank you for hanging on with us through the president. What did you make of his comments initially?
Well, I hope he's sincere about it, but if he really wants to come forward and do something really good for the country, it really needs to be something that binds future Congresses. If you just talk about, oh, we're going to cut $2 trillion over 10 years, there's no guarantee that a future Congress will abide by that agreement. So there's really very flimsy guarantee there. But if you have a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution, future Congresses will have to balance the budget. Who knows, it might include getting rid of some tax deductions or tax credits, but we would have a rule of law that we went by, and that's a rule that says you have to balance your budget. I am convinced that Congress, the president, no matter which party, are not responsible or trustworthy enough to do this without binding them by the chains of the Constitution. You have to have an amendment. You have to say you have to balance the budget, or I don't believe it'll ever happen.
He did throw out a little bit in terms of a time frame, speaking about 2 weeks. He will meet on Thursday, so with members from both chambers and both sides of the aisle. I do know that Senator Mitch McConnell is one of those that will be at the White House on Thursday. Again, what do you hope? Obviously, you'll speak before everybody goes in as to what you hope comes out of that meeting. Do you expect anything to come out of that meeting?
Well, I think really what has to happen is both sides have to come together, but we have to acknowledge the problem is spending. We're spending $1 out of $4 in the economy on government. We used to do 1 out of 5. It's risen dramatically in the last few years, so spending is out of control. We've got to cap and control federal spending, but it's not really on the revenue side. We pay plenty in taxes. You talk to anybody who looks at their paycheck and ask them, do you think you're paying too little in taxes? You'll find a very small minority of people who think they're not paying enough in taxes. We're paying plenty in taxes, but we've got to do something about the spending.
Is there anything that would appease you in terms of an increase in taxes? Anything at all? I mean, is there anything they can give you on one side that would make you say, okay, I'll agree to this and this tax increase?
Right. Well, I voted to get rid of the ethanol credit. So I do think that we could get rid of some tax credits and deductions. But if we do that, it has to be part of getting lower rates. So I was always a fan of Steve Forbes' plan to have a flat rate and less deductions. But if we're just going to get rid of deductions, that is basically increasing taxes on the economy. It's a bad time. Economists universally say bad thing to do, bad to raise taxes in a recession or cost jobs. So I would do it, but only in the context of lowering and flattening rates.
All right, one final thing for you, Senator Paul. The president did mention this kicking the can down the road. I know over the weekend some Republicans floated the idea of a mini deal out there that might give you 6 to 8 months to play with. Are you in favor of that at all, or do you agree with the president in saying it makes no sense to kick the can?
I'm voting against the mini deal, but I'm also voting against using the metaphor of kicking the can down the road. That one I think is getting overused a bit.
We use it all. Guilty as charged. Guilty as charged on this one. Do you believe then, and we had Steve Moore on here, I must have spoken to 100 economists about this. August 2nd, on one side you hear catastrophe from one side. On the other side you hear, you know what, it won't be that bad. Where do you fall on that argument?
Well, you know, we bring in $200 billion in revenue every month, and our interest payment's about $20 billion. So I think the president could take this off the table right now, and the president should promise the American people that he won't default, that he'll pay the interest on the loans. We have enough revenue to pay for about 70% of government, and interest rates about 7 to 10%. So we could keep paying interest, and we should. We shouldn't default, but we should have real budgetary reform. And the election last year was not about accepting some tokenism. It wasn't about accepting empty promises for 10 years. It was about really doing something. I think if you polled the balanced budget amendment versus raising the debt ceiling, I think the American people are with us on this.